Thanks very much, everybody, for joining this evening. You're all very welcome from the Tech for Non-Tech April event. We are delighted this evening to host Jace Bell talking about data as business and business as data. My name is Jenny Irvine. We have on the call today part of the Raise team, David Shaw and Michael McDowell. We're part of Raise Ventures, which is an early startup accelerator based in Northern Ireland, but working with startups across Northern Ireland, Ireland and into the UK. And we've been running these Tech for Non-Tech workshops for, well, nearly 2 years. And the reason we started them was to try and help inform founders that maybe wouldn't have great technical knowledge about some of the specifics of technology. We've talked about no code, we've talked about building communities, we've talked UX, we've even had a gaming event and a mental health event as well. So lots of really good topics, and great to have one tonight on data. So you're all very welcome. We've just said we've got quite a wide range of people joining from across not just Northern Ireland, but into Scotland, into Donegal, and there. So great to see you from Glasgow as well. So thank you very much for joining. I'm going to hand over to Jason, who's joining us tonight to do his introduction and have a chat through the slides. If you do have any questions, pop them into the chat, and we'll open up the microphones and have a chat at the end if you're happy enough. So happy to pass over to Jace if you want to kick off.
I'll kick off, thank you. Hello everyone. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to listen to me. So thank you for that. And you've got families and food and all the rest of it. So thank you. Okay, you ready? Should we get going?
Let's do it.
So let's do it. Yeah, about me. I don't take this too seriously, do I? Yeah, so I've been in software since 1988. I've worked with customer loyalty data since 2002. I was my first sort of proper Northern Ireland startup was UVoucher, a data sentiment. Yes, it is data, not data, but anyway, we can have that conversation later, David. Yeah, back in 2009, and since then, most of my work revolves around data in any some way, shape, or form. I've been on the program committee for the O'Reilly Strata Data Conference in San Jose, New York, and London. My day job is high volume streaming data for banking and insurance with a company called Digitalis, based in London. I work remote. I worked remote for over 10 years now. People kind of know me for writing a book on machine learning, which did in 2014 and again in 2020. And I don't like chocolate, but other than that, everything's good with the world. My Twitter name is Jason Bell Data. My phone is on flight mode, so you can heckle me if you want. I can't do anything about it. I do make this actually a mandatory thing where you can basically say what you want and I'll deal with it later. Okay. So let's crack on. So the question. When I was talking to David and Jenny and Matt about doing a talk, they said, "Why do you do it on data?" Which was like a nice, small, narrow thing to talk about. So thanks, David. What is data? Cast our minds back to November 2010 and think where we were. Martin Gilchrist may have actually been at this event at the same time. It was Big BizTech Belfast at the Ulster Museum. This man here asked this man here, "Can you sit on a panel?" And I asked why, and he says, "Because you cause trouble on panels." And I went, "Yeah, okay then." And then during this panel, there was 4 of us, Matt, myself, and 2 other gentlemen one from Invest Northern Ireland and one from Momentum, I think at the time. A question from the floor came from a chap called Kevin Parker. "If I gave you £100, what would you invest it in?" And the answers were kind of where I was expecting things to go. It was talk about cloud video, bandwidth, and no one was talking about data. And I said, the amount of data that we're producing will need to be mined, made sense of, and keeping in mind, we're talking 2010 here. The iPhone had only been out 3 years. I was carrying around an iPhone 3 in my pocket at the time. So all this data was being produced. Twitter was starting to really take hold. People were using Foursquare for check-ins and stuff like that. So I knew it was important. So what I basically said, Kevin paraphrased it for me on his blog, data is the new oil. This statement has been bandied about so much now that it's actually quite old. In the next 10 years, we're actually 11 years since that event. It's really weird, isn't it? Yeah, and it is an incredibly important resource, data. So when we say, when we talk about data, what is it? And it comes under some different classifications, which I'll get onto in a second. But basically, data is units of information. I say often numeric here, but once I'll show you bits and pieces going through this talk, they're collected through observation. So phones, point of sale is a really good one, loyalty card, those kinds of things. Any interaction you have with the computer is basically creating data somewhere along the line. Once we have data, though, we can do stuff. And that's the important bit. It's also the exciting bit as far as I'm concerned. Because we all have access to the information. Everyone has access to it in some way, shape or form. There's loads of people that can analyze it and there's loads of people who can't. And that's fine, but that's why we have products and services to do this kind of thing. So to get from A to B, to get from data into insight, we have to do something in the middle. This could be just analyzing something on a spreadsheet. It could be a big data job. It could, it could be a machine learning algorithm, those kinds of things. I'm not going to go into the technicalities of those things, so please do not worry. But basically, the bit in the middle is where the magic happens. So the more data you have, the more information you have, and more information resolves uncertainty, which means that you can make better informed decisions going forward. And what I'm going to do in this talk is go through a number of different ways that data is used every day, mainly around customer loyalty, but there's some other bits and pieces in there as well. But to me, data is a story. It's always a journey. It's constantly moving forward, and it's always an adventure. You don't always get the answers you want, but it's still fun to do. There's two types of data. Structured data. Most of you will know structured data from using things like Excel. So there's dates, phone numbers, postcodes, customer names, and formulas that are in there. They're structured. They can be queried easily enough. On the opposite side of that, there's unstructured data. So it mainly revolves around text. Email content, multimedia, image and video is unstructured data. There usually is a process to analyze this stuff, and it can be quite expensive to do and quite time intensive to do as well. What's our aim? From where I sat in this near 20-year journey with working customer loyalty data, Emily Weiss of Glossy and the team kind of nail it really nicely, which is technology is the key to building one-to-one relationships at scale. This is really important. It is now about the one-to-one, where marketing has just put things in segments previously. What we're seeing is a huge move to really ultra personalization, where we need to know each customer individually. And this is probably a good 5 or 10 year play that will be happening up until 2030 and beyond. There's some future things that I'm going to discuss later on in the talk. What we're really trying to do with this insight is start flipping people within our distribution of customers. So if you look at this this chart here and imagine that the x-axis is the number of customers and the y-axis is revenue, You may have heard of the 80-20 rule. So the 80% of something comes from 20% of the other. So with money and startups and business, the general guiding light is that 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the customers. The question I've had for over 10 years, and it was one of the things that I had in my mind with UVoucher at the time, was how do you get customers from here to there? And how do you get them from being that kind of passive thing into active, high-paying customers? Because targeting down the low end takes time, it takes money, and it takes an awful lot of effort. So if you target nearer the height of the curve, it may be easier to convert that customer into a higher paying customer. What we're trying to do here is influence behavior, but that's not a new thing. There's a company called Simulatics Corporation, who they were the class's sort of first data science company. They were around in 1952. They started off on marketing. They worked their way through, let's call them the Cambridge Analytica of their time. They were doing this in the 50s and the early 60s. They knew that with UNIVAC computers and a language called Fortran, which means formula translation, it's kind of an early AI language, that they could predict who was going to vote for whom based on certain trigger points, I'll call them trigger points, and talking points of the voters. And they were doing this in the 60s. They used these big UNIVAC things. They actually televised one of them, but the UNIVAC that was on the telly was basically a box with lights on it, and the real UNIVAC was at the university, so they had to phone the results through. It was a long time ago. I wasn't born there, in all fairness. What we've moved on to now is data in the everyday, and something that most people can relate to, which is why I actually talk about it a lot, is data as loyalty. So custom loyalty. Who hasn't got a Tesco?
Yeah, I resisted for a long time, Jace, but now I have one.
I have a club card too, actually, but I don't actually use it. I don't know if as actually
motivate behavior.
Oh, sorry, Jace. You kind of went silent for like 5 minutes. So
5 minutes?
Oh no, 3 minutes maybe.
But 10 seconds.
The previous slide, you said something about Tesco, and then you kind of disappeared.
Oh right. The question I asked is, who's got a Tesco club card, or who doesn't have a Tesco club card? That's But anyway, it was not important to the talk. It's okay. So when we talk about data as loyalty, we're using data to identify customers, track spend, and ultimately motivate their behavior, so we can reward the performance, but also increase the bottom end for that customer. But to start tracking the loyalty, there's one thing that you do really need, and that's a customer ID. You need a unique customer ID to know who's actually doing what. So you see the number there starting with 38. That's a long customer ID. The QR code below it is the QR code for that customer ID, and the huge barcode at the bottom is the barcode for that customer ID, which no one would ever use because it's just crazy. But with this customer ID, we can link all activities for that customer against all the activities that we have in the business. So in the diagram there, which is from Target, the supermarket, in the States, they use the customer ID specifically for tracking absolutely everything from voice contact, mobile couponing, things through the website, mobile, any purchases, point of sale, mail outs, all that kind of thing, all tracks back to that single customer ID. With that customer ID, you know behavior of that customer, even from when they visit the store, when they do a transaction, even if you start delivering offers in different ways. You know, you can deliver an offer, whether it's on the mobile, on a website, through email, or through post. So some customers respond to postal vouchers more than they do with mobile. It really depends on the customer and what their preferences are. Our job is to make sure that we have all those bases covered and we know which ones they're using in order to maximize the effect and probability of them actually buying something with that offer. So without an ID, you don't really know who's doing what. And it's all about the customer. Everything's about the customer. I don't care what business it is, it's always about the customer. Even when tech companies say that their tech's great, that's fine, but it's all about the customer. So we need to have them on board. I don't know the makeup of everybody here and who's doing startups, who's in biz, all that kind of thing. If you are a startup, start creating a culture of collecting your own data and not relying on third parties to do it. So social data will get you so far, but you still need to record everything yourself. Whether that's CRM, whether it's a sheet of paper, you know, regardless. Paper's important, but I'll get onto that in a second. Main thing is just to keep it separate. If you don't own the data that you're collecting, your data essentially belongs to someone else. So I know a lot of companies that go through Facebook and do Facebook sales and all that kind of thing. They get upset that they can't get granular analytics out of them. Etsy is another good example where Etsy stores do not get, or they retain the customer information. They're not allowed to because it doesn't belong to them, it belongs to Etsy. It's that kind of level that we're going to. So customer data is everything, whether that's point of sale data, in-store conversations, they're really important. And I'll show you a company that's using those really well in a second. Location and weather data, that can be acquired third party free of charge. Open Weather Map's actually a good one. I spoke to a couple of ice cream companies years ago, and we figured out that people don't really buy ice cream when it's really hot because they'll stay outside. It needs to be just a tad cooler, and when it's cooler they actually go inside and buy ice cream. They found that sales would go up, very dependent on the weather, but if it was too hot people wouldn't actually go and get an ice cream, they'd stay outside and sit on the beach or what have you. Interesting insights. Social data you can take. It doesn't belong to you, but it can be useful. The likes of Twitter's a good example. It used to be easy to get the data out of them. It's actually a lot more difficult now. You have to tell them what you're going to do with it. It's not just a case of signing up for an API key anymore. You now have to go through a process of application and telling them what you're going to be doing, how you're interacting with the customer, and what you're going to be doing with the data. So things have changed over the last 10 years or so where Twitter's been concerned. And anything else that you think that's useful? I don't know everybody's business, but if you think, let's make a record of that, then yeah, it's probably worth doing. So one of the most data-driven companies there are is Zara, the fashion brand. Whereas most fashion houses will do 2 collections, an autumn, winter, and a spring, summer, Zara will do one every fortnight. And they do that from the data that they collect from every store. Their entire process is run by the data from the POS and in-store. That dictates new designs, which are fed back from the management team of the stores because they're talking to customers directly. Those get fed back to the headquarters in Spain. Designs are made, and everything's limited edition. Every special edition garment that Zara make is only made at a run of 20,000. And when they're sold out, they're sold out. They don't really do any deep discounting. The new stuff always appears at the front of store every fortnight. So it's a new collection every fortnight and people will buy into it. They notice that customers return and still buy every fortnight when the new collection comes out because they want the next best, they want the next thing that's coming. The one thing that Zara didn't really do was social. They weren't that interested in it because they didn't need to be. They were gathering all the data themselves. It's only in the last couple of years that they've taken Facebook as their sort of primary output for customer relations, but not anything. If you look on Twitter, you don't really find a huge amount on Zara. You find some stuff on Instagram, and most of it is on Facebook. Whereas some companies concentrate on Twitter. It's about finding that sweet spot of where the customers actually are. So the bad news is that social media rarely drives sales. It might drive awareness, but that's not really measurable. You can't really measure awareness. It's not a great metric. Likes don't really count much, I'm afraid. And you're not in control of who sees what. And if you use something like Twitter on the mobile now, you find out that tweets aren't necessarily in order. They will jump back to things that have happened 14 hours ago. And it's about trying to get eyeballs on content that you haven't seen yet, and not so much a case of the content that's just been generated. Twitter have gone to topics. Everyone all right? Cool. So, and if you take something like Instagram, you can't guarantee that your content is being seen by most of your user base. It's just one of those things that the way that the Instagram algorithm works, not everyone sees your posts. So for using that as a sales vehicle is actually really difficult. Obviously, Instagram hooks into the Facebook shops if you have a business account, which a lot of the companies, Gilt Group, Zara, Mango, all the clothing companies plug into Facebook shops and sell direct that way. You have to be upfront about how you're going to use customer data. It still belongs to them, really. It's their lives, what you're tracking. So be nice, please. What I'm going to do now is go through some scenarios. And I'm going to start off with the real basics. The humble stamp card as a starting point. Bits of cardboard hold value. There we go, those bits of cardboard especially. While these seem really simple, you'd be surprised the lengths that people will go to rip these things off. There was a website dedicated to how to print the Nero stamp and do it randomly so you could print a card off with your own printer a number of years ago. It got taken down in the end. It is something I never tried. I always bought my tea and coffee at the time. So yeah, it's not digital. There's no faffing about.
Having a couple of connectivity problems here, guys, this evening. Just give it a wee second, see if Jason comes back. I have to say that, yes, like David, we've got plenty of those cardboard loyalty cards stuck in the purse and always wondering if you put it to one side, then it might not come back. And when you go into that shop, you might not have it. So then your purse is full of bits of cardboard. So I'll drop a message here and see if he's still online. Oh,
I'm back.
There we are. Sorry, I just lost you for a couple of seconds just talking about the many cardboard loyalty cards that I have. Do you want to try again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
It's just a bit flaky. What's this big London Dairy City deal is going to get you proper Wi-Fi, isn't it? Yes, that's what they were talking about today and yesterday at the Level Up conference with the big city deal.
Can't hear you.
All right.
I bet you got Virgin, Jen.
Hold on.
Maybe got Virgin. Can you hear us yet? Log
Nobody
off,
wants
log
to hear
back
my
on.
Virgin rant, do they? No.
Yeah, shout out to, let's see, who's got the highest number of loyalty cards? I think I've got about, let's start with 10. I think I've probably got more than 10.
I actually have loads. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even use them. I just collect them, and then I'll have like wallets full of them or like cupboards full of them. So it's just
I often wonder why they don't do it the other way around. So you can buy 10 coffees for the price of 8, rather than having to buy 8 coffees to get some free coffees. Because if they let me buy up front, or maybe, if they let me buy up front, they're going to get my loyalty because I already paid for it and I'm going to go back to get that, rather than having to go through the process of buying them all and then getting the coffee. I see Gilchrist. I see Gilchrist. He was thinking there. I had a slight wobble as well as I said it. Did my sums add up? But does that work from an accountancy viewpoint?
Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yeah.
You're
Cool.
back.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. I just got thrown out.
It's okay.
It's good old Zoom.
Shall
Yeah.
we continue?
Yeah, looks good. Back up and running.
Cool. Okay. So obviously you've all been doing sums now while I've been away. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn my actual video off.
Yep, can try that and we can still hear you.
No, won't let me do that. Oh, let's go with it.
Yeah. give it a go.
Okay.
See what happens. Go ahead.
So where was I? Yes, no digital faffing, 500 bits of cardboard. That's it. Okay. So for each of those 9 bits, 9 bits of insight on each piece of cardboard. Now, what doesn't happen a lot is maximizing the information you actually can get on the card. So no one writes the date on when a transaction happens. We know that an average transaction, I mean, Nero, for example, medium latte is 225. So the total for that card there is 2025 average. Okay. And if we start writing the date on each of those transactions, what we end up with is a spreadsheet of the dates. So we now know how long that card is active. So I'm on the top row there. My card usually lasts 15 days before I claim my free coffee and then get another card, which means I'm probably going to, if I'm a regular anywhere, I'm going to be spending around just under 500 quid a year on tea. I actually spend a heck of a lot more on that because I buy tea in bulk, but that's a different conversation entirely. So what we've essentially got here is it's a no-code startup. You now have a custom loyalty startup based on bits of cardboard, but with some insight. No apps. I mean, I'm now preaching against myself here, but there's no applications. There's no difficulty in all of this. And one of the interesting things I learned with running UVoucher was one thing that retailers are really interested in is it quick? People, if the customer is slowed down in the transaction, it doesn't go well with the retailer. They don't like it. The one thing I do know, this is going to be controversial, no one needs the open banking protocol to know when I bought a cup of tea. Seriously. I'm not going to let anyone near my bank account to do that. It's not happening. It's those kinds of transactions will only be 1% of my actual bank account. Why would I let anyone read the whole lot? It's logic I don't quite understand. Anyway, it's making sure that we do not abuse the trust of the information a customer is willing to give us. Okay, let's take it a step further with the loyalty card. Now, lots of people have loyalty cards. the club card's been around since 1995. The next card has been around since 2002. I worked for a company where we were working with next card data, and they sent it all to us on one CD in 2002 to mine, and we actually did behavioral analytics on that data, to the point we could actually suggest alternative products based on the same product lines. Basically, you swipe, they learn. For anyone that's been sad enough to study it, me, the way things are now, each point of sale links directly to data warehouse. So basket, customer, all goes through to data warehouse straight away now. And there's mined. Now, Tesco, when they were doing the club card originally in 1995, they only mined 10% of the basket, and built their offers around that 10%. So they got it wrong a lot of the time when it came to sending offers out and vouchers. Over time, they improved that, but I would say now they are literally doing 100% of the volume. Not everyone gets vouchers, which is interesting. Not everyone gets them. If Tesco feels that someone is distancing themselves from the brand, or this is what happened previously, it may have changed now. If people were distancing themselves from the brand, they ended up not getting their mail outs. But now things have moved online. You probably get access to the vouchers whenever they come around. The thing is, they are still done quarterly. It's still 4 Christmases a year. That's what they actually call it. Originally, the reason it was 4 Christmases a year is that's how long it took to mine the data. But at that time, they were also sending out offers for things that they think you would like. And what they were really measuring was 3 things. They were measuring whether you championed the brand, whether you were committed to the brand and you kept going back, and your contribution, how much you spent. But the spend was not the main driver. It was whether you championed the brand or not. And over time, it's changed. So where it was vouchers, where you got your quarterly club card statement and you say, right, you got £7 worth of vouchers, and then other things that would entice you to buy that stuff, £2 off this, or 1 buy 1 get 1 free kind of thing. It then went to vouchers only. So it's only matched against the spend. It partnered with other brands and you got a better deal. But where it moved to next surprised me, but this was something that happened because of COVID, I believe, where it came only about membership and vouchers. And when I say membership, I mean things like this. So if you take a look at these whiskies, you'll notice something. You'll see the full price, but you'll also see the club card price. It's not about spend anymore. It's about being aligned with the brand, which really interested someone last week when I told them this, because they realized that they got a fancy car and could open it with a phone, but were leaving the club card at home and they were spending a fortune on booze. But anyway, that's a different conversation. So it's no longer about how much you spend, but whether you're willing to associate with the brand. The next question is, who likes you? So the Net Promoter Score, this comes under some fire, which is fair enough. But the main thing is it's really simple to do. It's quick and it's really handy index number to get. So the main driver question for Net Promoter Score is, how likely would you recommend this brand, our brand, to a friend or colleague? And it's a scale of 0 to 10. So 0 to 6 are classed as detractors. They do not champion your brand. 7 and 8 are passives, they don't really care. And the 9 and 10 are the promoters. And it's the 9 and 10s that we're really looking for. The Net Promoter Score is a calculation of the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors. And it's a scale of -100 to +100. So say 250 people were part of this survey, 178 were promoters and 56 were detractors. That gives a net promoter score of 48.8. That's fine. Is anyone seeing a pattern yet, though? Going back to our 80-20 graph, if you flip it, look where they lie. So while the net promoter score kind of ignores the passives, I'm actually interested in the passives and how to convert those into promoters. That's something that the net promoter score doesn't do. The thing that we're moving towards is algorithmic commerce. So Birchbox were around a few years ago, and they sent out samples. And their main criteria was this formula. And all this did was really basically say, does this product give happiness to the customer? And if it did, it went in a selection process of samples that were going to be sent to that customer that month. It was originally started on a spreadsheet, but obviously as they built over to millions and millions of customers, they had to scale it up. So this top line is basically something called the backpack problem. If I have a number of products, which products do I put in this backpack in order to maximize the happiness of the customer? So this first formula here is literally, does this product J give happiness to customer I? The next part is binary. Do I put it in the basket, yes or no? And that gives us a score. And the highest scores are the ones that then get sent to the customer. What's moved on from that, though, is moving on from samples. The driver for Birchbox at the time was sending samples that would drive people back to the site to then purchase through e-commerce. Whereas where Birchbox was sending samples, Stitch Fix is about just sending product. You don't get to choose what they're going to send you. They send it to you based on what they think you like. So when you sign up to Stitch Fix, you're presented on sign up with 4 or 5 pages of questions about what you like to wear, what kind of stylings you like, colors, spend, all those kinds of things. Probably takes about 20-30 minutes to sort out. And at the end of it, all you're doing is saying when you want to be sent stuff, whether it's when you feel like it, every 2 or 3 weeks, every month, every 3 months, or every year. But you don't get to choose what you're getting. You can send it back. They'll send the box with things in it, and you send back what you don't like, and you keep what you do like. This is the sort of real starts of algorithmic commerce. To put this in context, Stitch Fix are currently worth about 11 billion. They have over 150 data scientists. A lot of them are ex-NASA. They've been astrophysicists, and they've now gone to Stitch Fix to work on data science problems instead. Basically, how to get people to buy stuff. So with all this stuff about loyalty and not loyalty, as the case may be, there's a certain line where we do not cross, and it's a creepy line. We do not start freaking out customers based on the predictions that we know about them. Free data, free use of an application does come at a cost. It's your data. Here's a really good example of that. Has anyone ever heard of Arped Elo? No. Nope. No. So he designed something called the Elo rating system, which was for chess. It was to rate chess players. That's it. It's nice and simple. It's a really simple thing. A new score is based on the old score, added the probability of that player beating the other player. Simple as that. So, for example, we have 2 players. One's got a rating of 1200. The other rating's got a player rating of 1000. The first thing we do is we calculate the probability of those 2 players winning. So we've got 2 numbers. The next part of that is running each case of player 1 winning and player 1 losing. And that gives us the new updated ELO scores. The question is, could this be applied anywhere else? The answer to that is yes. Relationships. So does the person on the left like the person on the right? When I say person, it's not him or her. because they're both AI generated people. The earrings are a dead giveaway. There's a website called This Person Does Not Exist. It's worth having a look at because it's scary. And it will generate a face based on all the other faces that it's analyzed. And each of them are unique. Some you can see that you can see it's generated. Some of them are absolutely frighteningly accurate. Anyway, so in terms of relationships, if you swipe right, you win. If you swipe left, you lose. So Tinder used the ELO scoring system to start off with. When they founded, up until 2019, they used the ELO score. If you swiped right, you increased your score. If a person swiped left, then your score decreased. And what was the aim was to make sure that the ELO scores of people meeting were about the same. Now, that doesn't take into account a lot of other factors, which now are taken into account. The ELO score came under a lot of criticism for Tinder because things like the ELO score was used in such a way that the scoring was quite a major rank of who was meeting whom, when there was a bunch of other things that weren't really taken into account. So Tinder dropped the ELO rating in 2019, but once your valuation's 10 billion at that point, then you probably can. So the algorithms be reworked. I mean, and all of this is great until someone starts asking questions, which you're allowed to do. It might take some time, but you are allowed to do it, especially with GDPR. GDPR is basically, yes, I give you permission to contact me personally about this product or service, but I also have the right to be forgotten as well. And if I ask for my data, I want you to give it to me. So someone took them to task on this, Tinder, a lady called Judith Depatel. She's French. She wrote a book on it. And that pile of paper there is all the data that Tinder had on her single profile. Because it wasn't just swipe data, it was everything else as well. They'd partnered obviously with every other third-party company to acquire data. So all browsing behavior, Facebook, tweets, everything was taken in and analyzed. They didn't know this and Judith didn't know this at the time until, and it took us 6 months to get hold of this data. She wrote a book about it. It's in French, so I can't read it. But that is the pile of paper. So like I say, free use comes at a cost. Right, we're getting towards the end. You'll be glad to hear. Machine learning. I haven't spoken about this yet. It's been around since the 1950s. Most machine learning algorithms haven't really developed much since, probably with the exception of transfer learning, where things have already been analyzed, mainly for images and voice and video, because they are incredibly intensive to do. But most of the core machine learning algorithms have been around since the 50s and 60s. They're far from perfect. So machine learning comes in sort of 3 flavors. Supervised learning. So where we have a data set and we know what the outcome was of that data, is supervised learning. And what we can do is take all that data, split it, usually 60-40, and use the 60% to train the algorithm and the 40% to test it. Okay. In some instances, it's unsupervised learning. We do not know what the target outcome of that data is. We just let algorithms run riot with it and see what happens. And it comes out with an output, which is some form of classification or prediction. There is such a thing as reinforcement learning, where the machine learning algorithm just basically trains itself. If anyone has seen, there is a YouTube video of an algorithm learning Flappy Bird, the game. And it would just play it over and over and over and over again and keep bouncing until it made progress. And the more it learned, the better it got. Most startups do not have enough data to use machine learning effectively. You need an awful lot of data in order to get good insight. and it's something I've spoken to quite a few startups about. It's when we start drilling down into what they're trying to do. It's like, well, where's the data? And it's like, oh, we've only got this. It's like, you'll need a heck of a lot more. For example, I used to do a talk on placing bets on 3 different types of machine learning algorithm: a decision tree, linear regression, which you could do in an Excel spreadsheet, and neural networks. And the media portray neural networks as a sort of next saving grace of prediction. So we're trying to classify or predict something. With neural networks, you can't actually explain what's going on. And if you don't have a lot of data for it, your predictions are usually rubbish. So with a small data set of scores, which I had, which was only about 400 or 500 rows, it was only 50%. It was no more better than a coin flip. The actual best thing to use was a spreadsheet and use linear regression. And that would give me a 95% confidence that my prediction was correct. So with neural networks, we don't know what's going on. We can't explain what's happening. They're a black box. And as time goes on, AI will have to become explainable. So the European Union are currently going through papers at the moment to bring in a standard in the same way as GDPR, but for AI. And some of those documents got released out at the weekend, where we need to have these things explained as to why they're happening. We don't use neural networks unless all the other options don't work. I wrote about this in the book. The idea is you have 20, 30 different algorithms, you try them all. And if you can't get decent answers out of a few of them, then start looking at neural networks to try instead. Okay, so let's start wrapping this up. For anyone that's getting started, start simple. Like we've proven, if it's a loyalty thing, bits of paper do work. It's only when you're wasting time on those kind of paper-based things, that's when you start to scale up and start to bring some form of automation into it. Be upfront with your customer how you're going to use the data. Always. Don't surprise them. And make sure that the customer has a payoff for you doing something with your data. If they will stop giving you data if there's nothing in return. It's about trust on both sides. Don't be creepy with it. Don't give offers that are just too close. Good case in point, if anyone's ever heard of the Target baby story, I do apologize. The marketing department via the maths department figured out that you only need 25 products to figure out when the customer's pregnant. And then their behavior changed. They started buying non-scented products. They went to decaf coffee. There were all these little triggers that basically said, this customer might be pregnant. But what Target did was take the creepy line just one step too far and sign the customer up to the baby club program without telling them. That was a no-no. That changed very quickly. If you've ever read the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duke, there's a whole thing on it in there. This goes back years. This is not a machine learning thing. This is just stats. Okay, and the last thing here is machine learning is not 100% accurate. It never will be. If it is, question it. That's the way machine learning is. It's never going to be accurate, regardless of what people say. If it is 100% constantly, that's classed as something called overfitting. You're making the data fit in order to get that prediction. Whereas if you throw new data at it, then it probably wouldn't give you the right outputs and may be completely incorrect. And 99% predictions sounds okay, but if you run that against 10 million customers, then there's a lot of bad predictions. So the other thing to take into account with all of this tech is human net behavior is predictable. And when customers have free will, predictions will never be accurate. If a customer has free will, any predictor will make errors in its prediction. What we're trying to do is tilt the level of certainty where we're making bets on our predictions being correct. it is still about the key of building a one-to-one relationship with a customer. I've put some reading material together for anyone that's interested. It's all there on that website. And thank you very much. I love feedback. There's a feedback form there if anyone wants to leave any stuff for me, because I intend to be giving this talk quite a few more times. It's going to be an iterative process of refining it and making it better, depending on what people want out of it. So I'd love to get some feedback if that's possible. And if anyone has any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jace. That was great. I think it was really good to kind of peel it back and make it really kind of simple to understand. We've got a couple of questions that come in, and I'll call them out. With Michael coming in to ask about data and how much is big data. Michael, we've got a lot of companies that we hear about the big data piece. Is that what you're thinking? Is it the type of company you think of the big data, or do you want to come off mute there?
Yeah, no, I think you've actually spoken about very well about how any data can be useful data, but then you said you did speak about how startups never have enough data to really do what they want to do. Can that be quantified in any way?
Let's go back to what big data actually is. Big data's, you could class big data as anything that can't be processed on a single laptop. That's what people used to say. When we talk about big data now, we're talking, if you're not, I've dealt with companies. Okay, here's a case in point. We class this as a big data problem. I worked on flight search data, okay, and it's relentless. You know, the number of flight searches that go on in a day is incredible. So one of the main for companies that produce that data, they produce around about 12 terabytes of data a day just on flight searches. Okay, now we're recording, but we go into 5 figures a month in AWS costs just to pull the data in before we even do anything with it. And we've got to store it. And we've also got to think about the back pressure of anything happening to a system over a weekend. So Easter's our longest holiday, Good Friday through to Easter Monday. So if they're not on the 24/7 SLA, they probably are, in all fairness. If it breaks at 1 minute past 5 on Thursday afternoon, I'm not going to get a call until 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. We calculated, because when we just talk about 12 terabytes of data, we're actually talking about 12 terabytes times a number of replications, because that's the way it's processed. So we were talking around about, for 4 days storage, we were talking about 272 terabytes of data just in case. That's big data.
Miles to Mars?
No idea. And I've done talks on this system as well, actually. I've done talks on everything. We only got to 10% volume of the data. It kept breaking everything it threw at it. It was so intense. It was just, yeah, things would fall over and come back up again. We wrote the self-starting stuff. So that's big data. And we had processes that did 2 things. First of all, it compressed all the data and sent it off to Amazon to be stored, so data science teams could go and have a look at it and get the trends and all key figures. You can imagine the kind of websites that would be using this information on flight price searching. And the other one was to find the cheapest flight. And that's 1 row. Out of all this data, we're going, so this block of data that's come in is, okay, depart from London Heathrow, fly to JFK. There's been 20,000 searches in the last 10 minutes. What's the cheapest one out of that lot? And it could vary, you know, so these systems were sort of going like this with the amount of data that's coming through. That's big data to me. Some of the clients I work with now is big data. I've seen so I don't want to get technical, but now my core subject now is a system called Kafka, which can process millions of messages a second and process them and do transformations in the middle and send them off to databases or wherever else. So we're talking, let's just call it data. We're not calling it big data anymore, you know. But on the opposite side of that, there's small data. And what's interesting is watching people use big data tools with small data problems. And what most startups have got are small data problems, which can probably be done in a programming language on one machine. They don't need 5K of AWS credits a month or anything like that. It's just nice, small, simple stuff, whether it's a Python script or it's done in a spreadsheet. And do not write off spreadsheets, because CFOs love spreadsheets. And if
that
it
was
can
one of
be
the questions
implemented,
that came through from Martin there, was specifically, what do you think are best data management tools? I mean, spreadsheets are hard to get away from.
just start off a spreadsheet. And if you look at any serious bit of software, you'll always get some form of option to export to CSV files, which is really about opening in a spreadsheet. If it imports from a spreadsheet, expect it to output to a spreadsheet. You know, not everything is a web page. Not everything is a bunch of flashy graphs. Most financial people just want spreadsheets. They're really happy with them. They understand them. It's an output they understand. So no, I go back to CSV files a lot in any processing I do. That's the output. It's the target output for these things.
Yeah, that question was
So
from
we've
Martin.
got big data.
Do you have anything to add to that question?
Yes, I suppose if you'd asked me the same question, Jess, what's the most important data collection tool for individuals or small businesses? The answer to me as an accountant is dead simple. It's zero accounting software, cloud-based accounting software, not a pen, not an Excel spreadsheet. The reason something like Xero is so important is it forces you down a route of data collection. It takes all those little tiny pieces of data from all those different sources, receipts, bank statements, rates, bills, whatever it may be, and it forces you to collate that data in such a way that it becomes incredibly useful. So I can go onto Xero on my phone right now and I can predict how much money will be in my bank account in a month from now. I can know how much my tax bill is, and I don't have to do anything else because Xero has forced me to collect all that data in such a way that it becomes incredibly useful. And I suppose my question was, what's your answer? So my answer is Xero. What's your answer to the most important piece of software for small businesses and freelancers?
Google Apps. Google Apps are on Microsoft Office 365. Documents, spreadsheets, you know, and most people do not understand the power of Excel. You know, once you start talking pivot tables and those kinds of things, most people go blank. You know, it's worth looking into. There's an awful lot of analysis, and it's like I was talking about linear regression stuff. That's 2 columns of numbers in Excel. Drag it down and create a graph, a scatter plot graph. Then you put a regression line through it, and then you can start predicting stuff. Easy. You don't need stuff I write for a living. You know, you know, most of the time you don't need it. Those kinds of tools work. And obviously, Martin, you and I know well enough, it's very dependent on each business's use case of what they do. But obviously, yeah, and in terms of accounting, in my day, it was Sage. I'm still Sage trained. Ironically, my only qualification is in accounting. Yeah, anyway, no, not many people knew that. Not in computer science.
Question came through there from David in terms of brands. And I guess, you know, the data that you own as a startup could potentially be shared with partners or other companies to make it more useful. Is that your question, David?
Yeah, it's sort of about, so I've seen a big trend in marketing where people, like brands, are like collaborating with other brands. So you'll see big brands just like doing sort of small marketing campaigns with each other. In terms of like data though, what sort of data could brands or potentially startups on this call, what could they be sharing with each other that's not privacy focused? Like there's also sort of thing online where people are like sharing open data, they're sharing all their web analytics, everything they're doing. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Just that sort of thoughts.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Obviously, there's a bunch of, does that fit in data protection laws? Is there customer opt-in for that kind of thing? Does it fit within GDPR? And to what level of data are you actually sharing? Does that data need to be anonymized first? And don't get me wrong, data anonymization does not always cover people's tracks. If you look at something like postcodes, you can scrub out names, that's no problem. But as soon as you've got a postcode, you can narrow it down to 75 houses. And already you've got a rough income bracket, you've got ABC ratings of that area, what the education level is from the census data. It's not like everything's anonymized. You can still kind of track back. I mean, even with Foursquare years ago, people used to use the API to pull the data out and figured out that they could actually predict, where people were going to be, even if you didn't know who it was. It can be, the tools are out there to do that kind of thing. So all it boils down to is trust at that point with the data. So if you're a startup sharing data with another startup, are you actually allowed to do that? Did you say in your terms and conditions there was an opt-in to do that? We're going to share it with third parties. If the authorization is there from the customer, then yes, it's perfectly, it's worthwhile doing. But you obviously have to have a very strict agreement between two parties of what you're actually going to do as well. Because ultimately one person still owns the data.
That's David's lovely wee dog. No, it's interesting, it's a project. I think at the start, before we got started, if you start gathering the data and know where it is from the start as a startup, then you can build on it and analyze it to make it useful. And I think one of the key messages definitely from today is using that data to make informed decisions. And there's a wee bit of few questions coming through here in terms of kind of big brothers watching you. One from David in terms of is Amazon watching me, and one from Martin talking about big corporations, watching us. Couple of 30 seconds or a minute.
Is Amazon watching me?
Yeah.
Probably yes. I don't own a Ring front doorbell. I'm never going to own one. I don't own Alexa either. I'm still fairly convinced that my phone's listening to me. But I've got no proof of that. But I would never have an Alexa in the house. I have a smart TV that's not plugged in or activated on the smart bit, because I read Samsung's terms and conditions that said we will record everything and analyze it. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. I'm not going to let you do that. It's I'll use it as a telly, thanks.
Well, let me jump on that. So my question was about do you think like Alexa is listening, or do you think that's really smart machine learning? Because like obviously if I'm clicking on stuff on Instagram, it's going to come up as an Instagram ad. Is it really smart AI, or is it more just
this is my opinion. This is my opinion, David. I don't know for sure, but because it's voice activated, it needs to be on to know when your voice is saying hello Alexa. So it's on. After that point, we don't know what's going on.
Go.
Yeah, I bet you're going to be a lot more careful about what you say in the house now, aren't you?
No, not really.
There's a question coming there from Michael. I guess it's leaning a wee bit more into the newer technologies, whether you call them new or not, the blockchain piece. Do we think that blockchain is going to mean more control of data ownership as well? It's a
blockchain. Drink.
Yep, buzzword bingo. Let's go for it.
Oh.
I could feel your eyes roll. I'm about 60 miles away from you. The earth moved slightly there.
Did it? Does that mean the weather will be better tomorrow because the axis has changed? You know what? I've got a book on blockchain over there, but I don't know. It's a slow database as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah. Well, see, that sort of was my point, is that your stuff gets, you see where everything goes, so it slows down. Therefore, in certain aspects, you'll supposedly, if we're led to believe the whole purpose of it is to show you where stuff goes, but is it all the other bits and pieces around the edges? That's really.
I looked at blockchain. I heard various pictures of blockchain where you're just going, oh God, no. The one use case I actually pitched to someone a long time ago now, and I think someone ended up doing it anyway. The amount of paperwork that goes into a technical inspection for a commercial aircraft,
Yeah.
has to be documented. Everything that is done has to be documented, which means it's in a chain of events, which means if you can prove the provenance of those chain of events, you're on a winner. And when it's something as big as an A380, a 747, a 737, or anything like that, then yeah, it makes complete sense. Do I want to know where my beer came from? No, I don't care. Honestly,
Yeah.
I couldn't give a monkeys. I'll just go to the shop and buy beer and drink it. I'm happy, you know. That's 2 startups of upset. You know,
Trying to remember who they were called, but anyway, I'll leave that.
So yeah, I mean, I think a couple of takeaways for tonight. Very much get started now in terms of the data. Keep it simple, and think of it as a journey. Very much go back, update where the data is coming from your customer. What can it be used for? What insights can it give you? What predictability can it give you? And
absolutely.
One of the big things we were talking about at the start is this is very much a community, and if you have questions, not just necessarily about data, but technology in itself, we have both industry founders looking for technical help and technical guys looking for industry help. So we're here to try and build that community and help kind of answer those questions, or signpost you on for, as we were talking earlier about virtual coffees. A virtual coffee can take you guys a long way if you have questions. So there's been a great kind of mix on the call here of startups and technical founders. So really appreciate.
Well, I think if anyone knows,
to listen,
anyone that knows me well enough knows that I'm willing to help. So if anyone's got questions, they know they can ask me. I've been kicking around Northern Ireland long enough now that I'm probably part of the woodwork, I think. The thing is, with data, if you don't have anything and you need to start now. I mean, coming away from this, just sit down with a notebook and figure out what it is you actually need and what question you're trying to actually answer. It's like, so who are my best customers? How do I find that out? How do I hear it? Tell me, explain to me, and describe. That was it. Tell me what you're trying to do. Explain how you want to get there, and then describe how you're going to do it. It's not difficult. And I've said this to a few startups as well. Know the journey of a piece of data from start to finish. From wherever it's coming from, and the processes and steps that you have to do in order to get the insight and the value from it. It may not go the way you think it's going to go. The more control you have of the data, the easier the insight will be. So here's another piece that is probably going to rub people up the wrong way. Data scientist is not the most important job. Data engineering and cleaning data is, but it's boring. People don't like cleaning data because it's drudgery. I like drudgery, it's my career. Most data is completely dirty. If you look at all the data that ever exists, probably 10% of it is tagged, only 1% of it is ever mined to be made into any form of insight. There's still an awful lot of data out there that can be tapped, looked at, and made value of, whether that's open data or whatever, or trying to create your own data. But the main thing is to have it in such a way that's structured enough that you can do analysis on it easy. Most people's challenge with data is cleaning it and then trying to get the insight out of it. So the one thing that those big data systems of the early 2010s, 2011s, Hadoop being the primary one, was, and I spoke to a number of companies about this back then, was they thought you could just throw data at it and then you get the insight back. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't work like that. You can throw data at it, you're still going to get junk back. And someone's just said that, yeah, rubbish in, rubbish out. It's absolutely that. So you need to think every step. It is a process, and it is a learning process too. I've made mistakes too, but ultimately what we're trying to get to is, would I put money on my own decision-making process about the outcome of this prediction? If you can do that and you have confidence in it and less risk, then you're probably going to benefit from it in the long run, definitely.
And for the non-technical founders on the call thinking about working with software developers, outsourced tech companies to build their databases essentially and build their product, they should be asking for this process to be understood, or at least getting them to write it out in black and white of how the data moves from A to B. Would that be a fair comment? They need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just another specification. It's another piece of software. If you think of it as a piece of software and write a spec out for it, it's got to do this. The data is going to come from here. This is what we're trying to do. And I saw something in the chat, and I can't remember who said it. If you don't have data, you can create your own. It's called synthetic data, and use that. Generate your own data first to try and come up with some form of predictions and assumptions. That's a good way of doing it. And I would say that you will see a number of synthetic data startups and providers and services coming along over the next 2-3 years, because as more adoption happens on AI, we still need to train those systems. And because data is messy inherently, you'll have companies producing that data first, albeit randomly, and producing it that way, to the point that I actually have, this is how sad I am, a book called Practical Synthetic Data Generation. Yeah, it's like that's my evening. That's what I do for fun,
Yeah, no, it's true. It's easier to work with simple, clean data than messy data. So if you can generate that, then it's great. We've one more question before we finish up from Martin. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, mine's a pint, Martin. Thanks.
You're very welcome. And just thanks again for a fantastic talk this evening. Every time you talk, you impress me more and more. And I know you'll be surprised.
Thank you.
To hear me saying that, but it is.
No, that's really kind. Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot.
This is a more generalized question, stepping back from the nitty-gritty of how data management and all that stuff works. A more general, your point of view on something. There's a saying, and something goes along the line of, there's no such thing as a cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. And therefore you're always trusting someone else with your data, whether it's Gilchrist & Co. with your accounting data, or whether it's the Chinese state with all the data that they hold from everything all over the world. And I'm just wondering what your thought is on how dangerous that data actually is. For example, Facebook may know, and I'm sure it's not the case, but if my wife was having an affair, it may know something about me or something that affects me that I don't know about. How dangerous do you think that data that's held on somebody else's computer is, and what do you think we should be doing to protect ourselves?
Stop having affairs for a start, Martin. Sorry, I was only joking. I didn't mean that at all. So, at the end of the day, algorithms are designed by humans. I'm sorry, that's the basis of this is it's humans asking questions and using technology to answer them. We're not at that singularity yet where AI just controls everything without us knowing. So Facebook's actually a good example of that. Years ago, they had a department that could run simulations on population sizes, not just small data sets, populations, obviously we didn't know these things were going on. I mean, I'm talking 10 years ago now, and we didn't have Cambridge Analytica and all that kind of thing in the news in the same way as we do now. So I think what has happened in the last couple of years especially is there's a bigger push on data responsibility, what we're willing to let out, what we're willing to tweet, what we're willing to stick on Instagram, what we're willing to stick on Facebook. I hardly touch Facebook now, I don't look at it. Apart from to plug my own speaking ego. So yeah, there's a danger that those predictions can happen. You know it hasn't happened. Your wife knows it hasn't happened. That's the main thing. The two of you don't know, you know. The real question for me would be, how do you challenge that? You know, because it does put a negative light on things. You know, that's quite a dangerous thing. It's a reputation thing at that point. You know, and if Facebook ever automatically changed things to it's complicated, that would be really bad. We are ultimately responsible for our own data. We're ultimately responsible where we put it. Now, there's been this thing with social media where it says it's okay to put your entire life online. I do not agree with that. I never did agree with that. And when I use social media a lot, which, yeah, you know, Martin, we've known each other for years now, since what, 2008, 2009, that everyone was tweeting. Everyone was going on Foursquare. Everyone was saying where they were. Everyone was doing this. Everyone was doing that. And the APIs have now narrowed down that access because that's what we've asked for. No, you're not asked to do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. The trolley problem for relationships. Never thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it is. You know, what's the impact of that incorrect assumption? Is it us? Did we cause that problem with the data? Yeah, please do. I don't have any right answers.
Is this what led us to European Super League, where the data basically told us that we only like watching the best teams playing the best teams regularly?
No, I don't think that.
And that's what we love. Then the fans came out and said, actually, no, something. Although we don't have a financial value, I'm watching Burnley playing West Ham. We still understand the integrity of that and the importance of that. Therefore, as a sport, it must continue and sustain. Well, however, the Americans crunching the numbers, I think only the Super League teams matter.
Well, I'm never going to see York City in the Super League, am I? It's not really a part of my. I don't like football anyway. But anyway, it was a really interesting week in terms of the news. It was like money. It's all about money. You know?
And money is supported by that. Data is the projection of money comes from the process.
No, I suppose I don't think it's data driven. I think you just take the top tier teams. People want to watch good football. I'm assuming the only football I ever watch is the World Cup. Vuvuzelas or not.
And that's what led the ITV getting the match of the day in the early noughties, and then it dying away. Anyway. Sorry, Jenny, I'm dragging us away.
It's an interesting thought, but I don't think it probably happened like that. It's the key drivers to any sporting. So I used to work for Sporting Life. That was the first website job I had in 1997. I worked for the Press Association on the Sporting Life website. I hate sport. That was a really good one. I don't like horse racing, but I like betting odds. I don't bet money. I just like the numbers behind it. That's how sad I am. Yes, it is all data driven. What's the maximum return of this thing here? So someone's crunched the numbers somewhere and said, yeah, okay, if we get these teams owned by these people. Now, it could have been some form of, oh my God, this is recording, some form of cabal of billionaires saying, yeah, let's do this. It could have been just as simple as that. You didn't need the data.
This is where the value, our data shows us this is where the value lies. And then they didn't realize about human emotion.
Exactly. They weren't expecting a fans' revolt, were they? Or they might have. They must have expected some push and pull, you know. But anyway, definitely. I don't like football, so I don't really know.
Yeah, we're all humans in the one-to-one relationship, but that you can't come back to that the data might have said, yes, let's make a Super League, but the one-to-one relationship of the people who really support West Ham, Michael, and really wanted to see them part of the league, and they're
and that goes, yeah. And that really goes back to Newcomb's paradox that I said at the end. If someone has free will, if a customer has free will, any predictor will not necessarily be accurate.
Yeah.
No,
Wow,
thank
I actually
you.
got part
I
of the talk
really,
to work.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time out, Jason. I thought it was a good presentation and hopefully got some good questions from that. And then, as Jason said, if anybody's got any feedback, please tweet or let us know, or let Jason know directly, just to keep obviously the presentations and improving these for the next audience is quite, it's important. It's important that we get the right message out there for the next audience. And for us here at Raise, we're delighted that we've got our new sprint intake up and running. We've got Claire and Jason here on the call, so very welcome. And a couple of others who are very busy at the moment who just couldn't quite make it. And we are running more workshops up and coming from now into the summer. So if you've got any kind of subjects that you'd be interested in us running workshops on from a technical point of view, please let us know and we'll get those in the diary. So thank you very much for all your time, everybody. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Jason.
More than welcome. Thank you very much for the invite. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jason.